It's me. It's Tuesday, the 6th of May. Sorry I didn't wish you a happy Cinco de Mayo yesterday or a May the 4th be with you. I didn't really participate too much in either of those amazing holidays, but I am happy to be here with you on Tuesday, May 6th, which if I look up, no, it's really not a holiday of any sort. I'm happy to have you here no matter what day it is. Thank you very much for joining me for today's show. I've got a great guest. It's Barry Ritholtz, who I spoke with late last week live on YouTube. If you saw it, we covered a lot of ground. It's a great conversation. It begins at about 34 minutes into today's show. But, of course, I've got a clip show, and it's a good one today, as well as your headlines that I'm going to get to right now. Thanks to everybody who joined us at last night's Hangout. I host 2 Hangouts a week for paid subscribers, and we were there for 3 hours last night, and it was good pretty much the whole time. Thoughtful conversation, lots of interesting discussions, subjects, and plenty of laughs as always. Also, we had 2 special guests last night at our Hangout. J.L. Covan stopped by. He's a regular listener, contributor, supporter, and, of course, guest here on the show. And David Campbell of Australia, the host of Today Extra, their national morning television show, and my BFF, my husband in Australia, who I talk to almost every day for the past 4 years. We've been friends for a very long time, joined us to explain what the hell happened in Australia's election. And it was a lot of fun to have both those guys and everybody else that joined us, over 50 people for 3 hours. If you're not coming to the Hangouts, I highly encourage you to consider it. You could sit there with your camera off and still have a great time and feel connected to other human beings here on Earth One. So just another promo for the Hangouts, which are Monday and Thursdays at 8 East. If you're not there, you're missing out, is what I'm supposed to say or something. So anyway, thanks for everybody who joined me. Sorry, the show is up a little bit late this morning, but I slept into 5 a.m. and now it's time to do it. Let's get to those headlines from yesterday, starting with what I personally would characterize as a terrifying new development and announcement in the Middle East. Israel has announced plans for an intensive escalation in Gaza. Yesterday, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, declared that Israel was, quote, on the eve of a forceful entry to Gaza. Israel's Security Cabinet voted to approve a new plan for tens of thousands of additional soldiers to seize and hold territory in Gaza and relocate Palestinians to the south. Netanyahu said Israel's military leaders told him it's time to launch the concluding moves. The escalation followed more than 2 months in which Israel continued to blockade and bombard the enclave as ceasefire talks to free remaining hostages ground to a near standstill. Israel has barred any humanitarian aid to Gaza in an effort to press Hamas to surrender, leading to catastrophic shortages of food, water, and medicine, according to the UN. An Israeli spokesman said the offensive would aim to increase pressure on Hamas to release the hostages to destroy all the group's infrastructure. Officials said it would start slowly ahead of President Trump's trip there next week to the region. Ceasefire negotiations are ongoing, but the official said that if a deal is not reached soon, the expanded ground operation would commence in earnest. And there is already a horrific humanitarian disaster in Gaza. It would seem that Israel and the U.S. are starving the people of Gaza to death. I mean, I don't know how else really to put it. And anyone else who is supporting this, people simply would say, well, why don't they just release the hostages? Hey, I agree with you. I agree that fully that they should release the hostages. But I also don't think that a people should be starved to death. The children should be dying because they're starving to death is the reporting that I've read over and over from a wide range of outlets. Are they mistaken? There is no life here. Palestinians fear Israel is imposing in Gaza its endgame. That's The Guardian. Mehdi Hassan. This is an official plan for ethnic cleansing. If you supported Israel for the past 18 months or so under the assumption that this was about the hostages, you were taken for a ride. If you still support Israel's assault on Gaza, you support ethnic cleansing. It's that simple. Hamas says it will not engage with Israel again until the hunger war in Gaza ends. 2 million people starving right now? I mean, and that could be changed in a moment. And if you think that if Israel releases the hostages, that it'll change, I'm not sure at this point. And I don't think that that's how it should be looked at. I think it's gross to look at it that way. I'm sorry, but this is just so unbelievably immoral by any philosophical standard of morality. There's just no way to defend it, and that's how I see it. Feel free to make an argument or make a point. I will play that argument. I'll play your voicemail. I'll do whatever you think is needed to hear you out, but I have a real hard time with this one. I know many of you do as well. All right. Well, that is the big story that I saw from yesterday. It's an international story, but I wanted to make a big deal out of what seems to be an absolutely horrific humanitarian disaster that is only going to get worse now with this land grab, and it would seem major escalation, which should affect the whole region. All right. Well, here we go. I'm sure the adults in the room will take control. I'm sure the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, along with Donald Trump and his sons, will lead all of the interested parties and people to the promised land. By that, I mean the rapture. All right. Well, moving on. There are other stories that are very important that I want to get to. I just wanted to make a big deal out of that major development. Here's some kind of good news. Surprising a lot of legal experts and observers, the tiny King Trump administration asked a judge to dismiss a lawsuit that sought to restrict access to abortion pills. This was a position of the Biden administration's, and the tiny King Trump administration is now echoing that position. So that's interesting. They're not making it harder to get abortion pills, is my read of that. What am I missing? Those of you who are paying closer attention. How about this? Senate Democrats are demanding changes to cryptocurrency legislation, responding in part to evidence that the Trump family is using the president's power to profit from trading cryptocurrency. Yeah, I think that's probably the kind of most undercovered story. We've heard Senator Chris Murphy, I play him saying that here, and we've read other people saying the same thing, that every day President Trump is basically a grifter. It might be legal, actually, the grift, but the president is no doubt profiting off of his presidency. So it's also illegal, according to, I believe, all of our legal documents, like, the Constitution, the emoluments clauses that are supposed to prevent corruption, making sure federal officials don't get any kind of benefits from foreign or domestic governments or individuals or companies that could compromise their decision making, which is so the domestic clause of the emoluments clause prohibits the president from receiving anything, any emoluments they're called, any profit or advantage arising from him being in office, while the foreign clause prohibits federal officials from accepting any present profit, office, or title from a foreign state. The Saudis are building a $2 billion golf course for Trump. So, I guess it's probably just the business prowess of his sons convincing the Saudis that they should just build this golf course, and it'll get them nothing from the United States federal government, right? Yeah, except for the fact that they've been real close friends for a long time. All right, well, moving on to other stories. Hopefully that cryptocurrency legislation makes its way through Congress, but I doubt it. Senior officials at the National Endowment for the Arts are resigning days after the Trump administration began withdrawing grants. Another major story because of how important the arts are and how important it is to fund the arts. The senior official departure come as the endowment has been withdrawing current grant offers, and our tiny king has proposed eliminating the agency altogether next year. Among those leaving the agency are directors overseeing grants for dance, design, folk, and traditional arts, museums and visual arts, and theater. Also departed are the directors of arts education, multidisciplinary works, and the partnership division, which oversees work with state and local arts agencies. Those officials announced their departures in newsletters sent out by the endowment starting at midday on Monday. The National Endowment for the Arts was established in 1965. It's an independent federal agency that distributes grants to arts organizations and state arts agencies across the country. Its budget was $207 million. That's not a lot. In 2024, its financial report that year said it had provided more than $163 million in grants. Arts institutions across the country were scrambling over the weekend to figure out how to move forward with federal funding that they had been counting on. And so there's got to be a lot of journalism following up on this. If you know or are in a relationship with, support in any way, any arts organization that's going to be directly affected by this, please reach out to me. Put in the subject arts organization funding, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Some said they would appeal the denial of grants as specified in the notifications of the cancellations. Others launched fundraising appeals seeking to fill the gap with private philanthropy. Good luck, arts organizations across the country, many of which I and my family have benefited from personally and directly. So that was another blow, another cut to worry about. But moving on to other headlines, a coalition of states sued the Trump administration in an effort to block its slashing of the Department of Health and Human Services. Trump said he would impose a 100% tariff on movies produced outside the U.S. Apparently that's Jon Voight's idea. The actor Jon Voight is friends with Trump, and that would put a lot of the international filmmaking countries in dire straits, including the UK and Canada. I think that would be really not good. Of course, yesterday a lot of attention was paid to the fact that our tiny king wants to reopen Alcatraz as a functioning maximum security prison, except for that's never going to happen. It was way too expensive to run. That's why they closed it. And now it's one of the most visited national parks. And no one's doing anything to change that. It was a total distraction that was, I think, paid too much attention, other than if anybody else said it, we would call them mentally ill. Also yesterday, the administration announced a policy to pay migrants to deport themselves. In an effort to ramp up deportations, the administration has begun to offer $1,000 in a flight home to any undocumented immigrant who agrees to willingly leave the U.S. And no one's going to take that offer up. Like nobody. Like one guy. One guy from Honduras took up the offer, apparently. So we'll see what happens with that program. Latest to encourage migrants to self-deport. I can't see that being very popular. In other immigration news, the administration is now in talks with Rwanda to accept U.S. deportees. Also, the tents that the U.S. erected at Guantanamo Bay have not held any migrants at all. So what's going on with that? The EU is making a pitch to scientists who have lost funding from the Trump administration's cuts, which includes $566 million research investment. So that's great. They're just going to take our best scientists. What choice do they have doing the specific research that they do? In trade news, after the U.S. closed a loophole that allowed tariff-free imports of small orders of inexpensive goods, the Chinese garment manufacturers are now considering relocating. So that's an interesting story. And this really scary and terrifying story, the airport that I prefer and fly out of most, Newark International Airport, apparently temporarily lost communication with planes last week. Air traffic controllers lost contact with planes. Number of outlets reporting, but air traffic controllers briefly lost communication with planes at Newark International Airport last week, according to the workers' union. Revelation that came as travel disruptions there extended into a second week. Apparently it was about 90 seconds. But that's, I think that's really bad. And I don't know what happened, but that's got to get fixed. And now, what is this going to mean for travel in and out of this very, very important airport that millions of Americans use? The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which operates Newark Airport as well as Kennedy International and LaGuardia airports in New York, said in a statement on Monday that staffing shortages at air traffic control centers were to blame. The former president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association is now senior vice president of operations and safety at Airlines for America, which is a trade organization, said, his name is Paul Rinaldi. He said the systems controllers rely on have not been working at an optimal level. The issue is a lack of confidence by the controllers in the systems because of the interruptions they have had over the last 8 months or so. And Sean Duffy, the U.S. Transportation Secretary that Trump put in charge of the United States Department of Transportation, this guy who has no qualifications to be in that role, announced a series of incentives that he would, quote, supercharge the air traffic controller workforce, including $5,000 payments to new hires and academy graduates who successfully complete initial qualification training. Well, that should do it. The governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, wrote Sean Duffy in support of that plan and said that there's been decades of underinvestment, so maybe there is some positive outcome of that incentive plan. It was not clear when the delays at Newark Airport would clear up, and bad weather this week likely to contribute to headaches for travelers at Newark as well as other New York City area airports been, listen, like I posted yesterday, I would rather die in an airplane crash than have to fly out of JFK. So, joking, but JFK is just very hard to get to in New York City. It's hard to get to. It's hard to get out of because of the expressways in and out and its location. It's really challenging, I think. So that's why I always say that. It's not so much the airport itself. But moving on, I've got to tell you what else. Well, really, nothing. I don't have any other news headlines. Sean Combs, Puffy, went on trial. I don't know. I never talk about celebrity trials, but this one I paid a little bit of attention to. Jury selection started in the Manhattan trial. Sean Combs, 12-member panel will be confronted with the question of whether Combs led a typical celebrity entourage or, as prosecutors will argue, a criminal enterprise that enabled years of sexual exploitation and other crimes. So we'll see what happens with that, and that is all I have for you on today's headlines. Let's get to the clips. It's time for The Clip Show. And this is the new intro to The Clip Show. I think this is hilarious. This kind of dark humor is more appealing to me these days. I don't know, but you've probably seen this on Instagram or elsewhere. It's this little jingle where the people are just singing, "We're fucked." And I think that's going to be the opening of the clip show now. Maybe I should have it be the opening of the headlines as well. Here it is. Sorry. All right, there you go. Let's get started first with this car dealer ownership. He owns a car dealership in Philadelphia. His name is Dave Kelleher, and he was on CBS Sunday Morning. And I thought this clip here helps explain what the dealerships are dealing with and looking at, thanks to the self-inflicted kick in the dick of our tiny king tyrant.
Basically, every single new car in America is going to see a price increase. Prices are going to go up. And when prices go up, sales slump. It's that simple. I mean, the NADA economists suggest that the prices are going to go up between $2,000 and $16,000. A $2,000 price increase would slow our sales, according to the data, by 1 million cars a month. That basically, there's 16,000 car dealers in the United States who employ 1.1 million Americans. They're going to lose basically a month of sales due to this price increase.
This is happening tomorrow. These tariffs are taking effect. So you already know, I would imagine, how much you have to increase car prices at your dealership. Can you give us a sense of how much that is? Do you already have those new sticker price labels printed, ready to go?
No, we don't, because the cars that we have on the lot right now, and generally a car dealer keeps 60 to 90 days worth of inventory on the lot. These are pre-tariff. So none of the cars we have on the lot right now are tariffed. So we've seen a bit of a rush for people to get in before the tariffs come. But the cars that are being built right now in other countries are going to face the tariff immediately. Now, the American companies, Chrysler, Jeep, we're Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, but Ford, GM, they will see a little bit less of the effect of it, but they're still going to see effect. The Grand Cherokee, which is one of my most popular cars, it's built in Detroit, but 26% of the parts come from other countries. So those 26% of the parts are going to be tariffed. It's basically going to be taxed. And the Ford F-150, the most popular vehicle in America, is 53% of their parts are from other countries. So think about that. So these cars are going to go up no matter what you sell. Basically, every single new car in America is going to see a price increase.
All right, well, head on down to Dave Kelleher's Jeep Cherokee, Chrysler, whatever dealership or anywhere else who still has new cars in the lot, and buy now, apparently, is the advice we're hearing. Do you trust them? Do you trust the trade association there? It sounds like it's pretty accurate about car prices there. Maybe it's an exaggeration because it's in his interest, but I don't think so. All right, now I've got to play a clip that has the president's voice in it, and this triggers a lot of people. It's really not very long. The clip is from CNN, and they play Trump's conversation with Kirsten Welker on NBC's Meet the Press is set up. Question to Trump's former legislative director. He used to work for Mike Pence. It's that guy, Mark Short. And that gets us set up for the remaining couple more clips here. So I got to play it for you. Here it is. Sorry.
Morning. President Trump rejecting concerns that its tariff policies will lead to higher prices in a new interview.
Are you saying that your tariffs will cause some prices to go up?
No, I think the tariffs are going to be great for us because it's going to make us rich.
But you said some dolls are going to cost more. Isn't that an acknowledgement that some prices will go up?
I don't think a beautiful baby girl that's 11 years old needs to have 30 dolls. I think they can have 3 dolls or 4 dolls. Because what we were doing with China was just unbelievable. I'm just saying they don't need to have 30 dolls. They can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils. They can have 5.
All right, with us now, Democratic strategist, former Biden White House Director of Message Planning, Megan Hayes, and former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence, Mark Short. So 3 dolls, 5 pencils. Mark, what do you think about that messaging?
I think it's really damaging messaging. It's a little bit of a let them eat cake moment. I think for the president, I think everybody understands he's very financially wealthy, but beginning to tell the American people how many dolls or how many pencils they can have, I think suggests a little bit of an elitism perspective. And I think that, I do think this overall messaging has greater concerns coming forward because this is the week that the ports in Los Angeles and the West Coast are beginning to expect really to see a lot less goods coming into the United States. And that's going to have impact on workers in the ports. It's going to have impact on truckers. It's going to have ultimately potentially impact in stores because the expectation is that stores can run through the inventory they've accumulated for the next 4 or 5 weeks, but that's going to begin to fall off. And I think that's an image that really should concern the White House is if there's actually supply disruptions coming forward.
Yeah, there you go, Mark Short. Stop saying the phrase coming forward. Looking forward, there's a bunch of different ways to say that. And it didn't seem particularly articulate there. And neither is this guy. His name is David Joyce. He's a congressman. He makes a point here about shared sacrifice, that Americans know what shared sacrifice is. We talked about this at the Hangout last night. I forced it into the conversation because do we? What shared sacrifices this country made for the betterment of the public? I mean, last time a president asked us to do that was like Jimmy Carter. He's like, put on a sweater and turn down the thermostat a little bit for the betterment of the country. And everybody's like, go eat shit. You're done. And they fired him and brought in Reagan to destroy the government. Anyway, here is David Joyce, is Republican. He was also on CNN, and I wanted to share this with you. It's really awkward and weird, and he acts like he doesn't care about pencils. And anyway, here it is.
Is that what you're telling your constituents?
Well, I don't use pencils, but...
Oh, but they do.
Yes, true. No, look, anybody who's ever chased one of these dolls, the American Girl doll or the chubby ones that were big when my
Cabbage
daughters...
Patch Kids.
Yes, thank you, Cabbage Patch Kids. When my kids were little, know what an important Christmas event that is. But obviously, this doesn't start overnight. And so the idea that the Christmas trade is already starting to slow down the progress and there might be less around, I get it. I think American people will understand that because American people understand shared sacrifice. But what needs to be explained to them is that China has been eating our lunch. If you ever go back and look after World War II, they've slowly but surely stolen all of our steel industry by undercutting us, spring wire, everything they've done. They've stolen our technology that's gone over. They've stolen the IP. And the thing of they are enemy. And what I will...
Did the American people understand shared sacrifice? Do we? I mean, didn't COVID make that really transparently clear that we do not? Doesn't mean there aren't amazing people who would do whatever it takes to give a little bit more, pay a little bit more for the betterment of the group, the theory. But it seems like, I don't know about your community, your state, what you think about our country, but that old shared sacrifice thing really had me thinking. I'd love to hear from you on it. I thought this was interesting along this same subject, these lines about trade and tariffs and what it means. I love this guy, Jake Auchincloss. He's a congressman from Massachusetts. He's young, and he goes on Fox News. He does a great job. He does a great job on Fox News, including the always intimidating and condescending Laura Ingraham, who you hear making noises throughout his points, but still really good, and I'm glad that this is on Fox News. Take it away, Congressman.
I was on the Select Committee on China for 2 years. I absolutely support strong tariffs on China because they've been cheating on the terms of trade. What I don't support is tariffs on Canada that makes it more expensive for my constituents to buy home insurance. How is that helping the middle class right now? It just makes this president look like he's not serious about an industrial policy.
Okay, but most of the industrial stuff we're talking about, other than some aluminum in Canada, is China, is China focused. So, but you're then in favor of Trump's general approach to hitting China hard?
No. Because here's why. For tariffs to be successful, they got to do 3 things. One, they've got to be nested within an industrial policy that actually has a point of view and a plan about how we're going to re-domesticate manufacturing. He's not doing that right. Number 2, they've got to be aligned with our allies so that our allies and adversaries know what to expect. Yeah. And then number 3, Laura, they got to be done through Congress because no one can plan around this guy's tweets. I got business owners in my district who are saying, I literally have no idea what the next 12 hours is going to bring. Uncertainty is toxic for business.
Uncertainty is toxic for business. Everybody knows that. Laura Ingraham has got nothing. And that was real good. Jake Auchincloss. And guess what else? I can't believe I'm going to say this. This is Rand Paul, and it's real good. This is an edited of his speech on the Senate floor, making a conservative argument against tariffs and for the constitutional power that the legislative branch is supposed to have. It's very good. I think he makes a lot of great points. And it's going to mean nothing to MAGA because they're not conservative, they're not principled, they're not Republican. And Rand Paul, to a certain extent, is consistent on a lot of this stuff. I don't like him. I think he's not great for a billion different reasons. I've interviewed him before. He's a climate change denier and so much more. But here it is, nonetheless, well done.
It was an old-fashioned conservative principle that believed that less taxes were better than more taxes, that if you tax something, you got less of it. So that if you place a new tax on trade, you'll get less trade. Taxation without representation is tyranny. One person is not allowed to raise taxes. Our founding fathers saw this and said, no, we want to make sure that the authority of taxation begins not only in Congress, that it actually originates in the House, the body closest to the people. And yet here we are. An emergency has been declared. As the senator from Virginia remarked, everywhere. There's an emergency everywhere. Sounds like an emergency everywhere is really an emergency nowhere. Americans have now been ordered to pay higher taxes in the form of tariffs, but without the consent of Congress. Tariffs are simply imposed by presidential fiat, by proclamation. Government by one person assumes all power by asserting a so-called emergency is the antithesis of constitutional government. And Montesquieu said that when you unite the power, the legislative power with the executive power in the body of one person, that no liberty can exist. They worried about this. They said the president couldn't take us to war, only Congress could. They said the president couldn't spend money, only Congress could. They said the president couldn't tax people, only Congress could. These were the very bedrock and still are the very bedrock of our constitutional principles, and yet people, particularly on my side, are looking away and saying, oh, whatever. We'll just let the president do whatever. Look, I supported President Trump. I still support President Trump on many things, but I'm not for a country run by emergencies. Even if the person were doing what I wanted and it was, making every day my birthday, I would not be for that unless we deliberated upon that. There are constitutional processes that are incredibly important.
Yeah, well done, Senator Rand Paul. Well done. You should share that clip with people. I thought that was pitch perfect. I don't know. What do you have issue with there? Well, here is Secretary of State's spokeswoman. Her name is Tammy Bruce. And for years, like many of the other people that worked in Trump 1 and now Trump 2, she was just a talk radio person. And one of those mean yells at you on the radio people when you call in. And she's this gruff woman, Tammy Bruce, who also is a lesbian. She is openly gay, and yet she is working in this Trump administration, which is openly anti-gay. But nonetheless, here is her embarrassing appearance on CNN, forgetting that she's not on the Tammy Bruce show and that she represents the State Department and the Secretary of State. And Casey Hahn of CNN has no idea what to make of it. I thought it was pretty good.
You have individuals who've gotten into the country with visas or in a fashion that is through the process, and the dynamic of making a decision if they can stay in the country also involves due process. So I think the nature of how we're proceeding as a department has spoken for itself.
Okay. Has Marco Rubio spoken recently with Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador?
Well, I'm not going to speak up to which world leaders the secretary speaks to. He speaks to multiple world leaders every day. Is he still working on the case
in one fashion or another?
And I'm not going to speak
to his still working on the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia
with the president.
Is he still working on the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia?
I'm not going to speak to his work. I'm not going to speak to the nature of the work that he does every day in its details. Clearly, this has been an issue that is at the
State Department. I mean, with all due respect,
yes, but that doesn't mean that. Just a minute. That doesn't mean I'm the gossiper for the State Department.
I'm not asking you to gossip. I'm asking you for
the State Department. I'm telling you the nature of what it is that I can speak to, and it does not include the day-to-day operations or choices the Secretary of State makes. That's not going to happen. We clearly know this is in the forefront for the State Department and the forefront for the Secretary of State, but you're not going to get the nature of the details of negotiations, diplomacy, or the decisions the Secretary makes during his day.
Okay. Tammy Bruce, I appreciate you coming on the show today and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right.
Here we go. All right. There you go. I wanted to play that one all the way to the end for you because I thought it was pretty fascinating. There you go. All right. And finally, here's some laughs. This is from Jimmy Kimmel last night on Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Oh, yes, Donald Trump. I almost forgot. It's his fault. El Presidente took a trip down Cinco de Memory Lane today. He reposted this classic from 2016, Happy Cinco de Mayo. The best taco bowls are made in Trump Tower Grill. I love Hispanics. That was 9 years ago, and how far we've come. They were having a lot of fun with AI at the White House over the weekend. Did you see the picture of Trump as the Pope? On Friday, MAGA Teresa posted this photo of himself as the new Pope. Pope Banana Cream Pius. Pope Eggs Benedict. Pope John Pull My Finger. It was a moving tribute to the recently deceased Pope Francis, a man beloved by Catholics and others around the world. I have to say, I knew this would happen. I predicted it when he went to the funeral. He saw all the gold at the Vatican. He thought, I can live here. This feels right to me. And while it goes without saying that the pseudo-Christian MAGAverse would have lost its collective chocolate pudding had Biden or Obama or any Democrat done this, that was not the reaction for Trump. Instead, it was, oh, he's being funny, loosen up, everybody. Trump, of course, said he has no idea where the image came from and knows nothing about it, even though he posted it on his personal account. And here's the thing. I'm sure he did do it to be funny and to make everyone who doesn't like him mad. But what he seems to keep forgetting is he's the president of the United States. Doing funny things that make people mad isn't his job. It's my job. So I know he's a deal maker. This is my offer. You stop making fun of the Pope, and I won't tank the world economy, okay? Let's stay in our lane.
All right, there you go. Kimmel last night. I'd like to end the news segment on a laugh before we get to my guests, but now is that time. Barry Ritholtz is here. You got to go get his new book. It's very good, How Not to Invest. I know several listeners have bought it and getting great reviews already. The ideas, numbers, and behaviors that destroy wealth and how to avoid them. Of course, he is the founder of Ritholtz Wealth. You should read his blog, The Big Picture, Ritholtz.com. Love it. Love stopping by there pretty much every day. Support him and follow him on social media. Listen to his podcast available on Bloomberg. It's Masters in Business. Read him at Bloomberg Opinion. He's a very well-established writer and journalist and investor and talker, and we are good friends, and I always love talking with him. This is an important conversation. It originally aired live on YouTube late last week, and here it is now for you, Big Barry Ritholtz.
And we're live with Barry Ritholtz, just in the afterglow of publishing a big new book. Are you still feeling proud and great, or has what's happened in the markets and the economy changed anything, soured the release of your new book, which is so good, How Not to Invest? Hello.
Hello. No, I think all this mayhem has made it more timely. Maybe I got a little lucky with the craziness from April 2nd, because a big part of what I'm describing in the book is take control of your information flow. Make sure you're reading people and watching people and listening to people who are worth your time. Recognize that very often, I just had an argument with somebody about everything I read online should be free. It's okay, you run a financial services business. Should all your services be free? No, I got to hire people. Okay, so why not support journalism and democracy? Here's the dirty little secret. I used to ask crowds this all the time when I was speaking at events. What does radio and TV sell? And people always say the same thing. They sell advertising. No, advertisers are the buyers. You're the product. They sell you. And today we cross-reference you because the United States has such weak, at least when compared to Europe, weak consumer privacy laws, that we can cross-reference that with your browsing habits, your credit scores, your purchase history. So you have no privacy. You are the product for this free media, Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and on. If it's free, how are they paying the bills? By selling your data.
My question to you is, has anything changed since the book came out?
The book dropped March 18th, and then Liberation Day, as Trump has called it, Liberation Day was April 2nd, and the market took quite a hit. The economy has clearly slowed. There are some technical reasons why I'm not too concerned about that negative GDP print. The way it's calculated, imports are not produced here. They're imported, so they're subtracted out of GDP. So you end up, when the economy is robust and we're buying a lot of things overseas, it's a net negative. And so despite inheriting a fairly robust economy in Q1, GDP was negative, although the Doge stuff and a lot of the other seems like unplanned chaos is freezing everybody in place. The biggest change that's taken place, look, the future is always inherently unknown, but you usually go through life feeling like you have some degree of clarity. And what I mean by that is, I don't mean you're going to forecast where the market's going to be, but you're going to say to yourself, hey, I want to take the fam down to Disneyland in 6 months. So I'm going to book a hotel, I'm going to book flights, I'm going to plan food, I'm going to plan the whole thing. You do that when you're confident that you're going to have a job, that there aren't going to be sudden demands on your expenses, and that everything isn't going to suddenly cost more. And when you listen to the conference calls of things like JetBlue and Southwest and, of course, Delta, when they say we've seen our bookings 3 and 6 months out suddenly collapse because people are frozen in place. When you do surveys of CEOs, what are your hiring plans? And when you do surveys of CFOs, what are your CapEx spending plans? And everybody is, we're going to wait till the dust settles and we have a little more clarity before we commit to a multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar set of investments. You can, through lack of transparency and excess confusion, cause everybody to just freeze. And that's what's changed. Everybody's frozen in place. Tariffs are on, tariffs are off. Tariffs are on, no, there's an exception for iPhones. Now there's no exception. Now there's an exception for cars. Not really. There's a 90-day pause. You can't run a business if you don't know what your cost structure is going to be. And this is changing the cost structure.
Every quarter, big companies, public companies, they have shareholder calls and they talk about their earnings and they talk about forecasts. My understanding is how it works. And a couple of companies just canceled the phone call. They're like, we're not going to talk about our forecast. There's just not enough information for us to make a responsible prediction. Is that they can do that? Did that happen with more than a couple of companies? I feel like that's been happening.
It's happened with a lot of companies. And look, so why do we do quarterly calls? It's SEC mandated. People have to come around and say, Here's how much you're an owner of the company. We're reporting to you. Here's how we've done. Here's our revenue. Here's our expenses. Here are our profits. There's no obligation to say, and here's our best guess at what things look like in the future, because nobody knows. Hey, a big part of the book is nobody knows anything about what's going to happen in the future. You typically have all this business intelligence and data. Your salespeople are saying, I have hard commitments for shipping these goods next quarter in September, in December, and I have soft commitments for we're looking for this much. As we get closer, we'll sign a contract. Like, people just don't go to the store and buy stuff today. There's a giant economic infrastructure behind that involves logistics and planning and making purchases off in the future and shipping and transport. And all that business intelligence, thanks to technology, you can see exactly what is selling today, what the demand is for things in 6 months, maybe not much beyond that. But what we're hearing from corporate executives is demand has fallen significantly in the out months, in part as a reaction to the chaos in Washington, D.C. And I don't know how else to describe it. I try to go right down the middle and be nonpartisan, but I don't want to engage in false equivalency. Let me give you my favorite example, and then I'll shut the hell up for a few minutes. When the Federal Reserve changes interest rate policy, right? The Federal Reserve says, hey, we think that inflation has fallen enough that we don't have to continue raising rates, and we expect to start lowering rates in the second half of next year. And then 6 months go by, hey, we told you this a few months ago. We think in 2 or 3 Fed meetings we're going to start cutting rates. And then a month before the Fed meeting, fans out to all the Federal Reserve 12 district presidents, and they speak at the Petroleum Club of Houston and the Economic Club at New York, and they speak at Yale, and they just go all over and, hey, so we think that the time is getting close for us to cut rates. And then the dot plot changes, and then the day, that's where everybody's individual expectation of where rates will be. And then the Fed meeting comes, and they cut 25 basis points. And then Jerome Powell has a press conference, and then a few weeks later the transcript comes out. Nobody is shocked. Nobody is surprised. The whole thing was very professionally communicated, transparently. The market knows exactly what's coming, and even then they occasionally get it wrong, but you can't accuse the Federal Reserve of shocking the market. Even though everybody knew what Trump did tariff-wise in his first term, April 2nd, people were generally stunned and dismayed and shocked by what was being done, with or without DOGE, which raises all sorts of other problems. But when you turn around and what is the stock market except a discounting mechanism of expected revenue and profits in the future? Why am I paying $100 for this company? Because I think a year from now, 3 quarters from now, 6 months from now, it will generate this many billions of dollars in revenue and this many millions of dollars in profits. So it's worth paying X today because we think it's going to be Y. When the market sells off 5% a day for 2, 3, 4 days in a row, what the market is saying, and I hate when I hear people say this because it's always a subjective interpretation and a Rorschach test, but I'm going to play it right down the middle. The market is essentially saying we did not anticipate an impact on our revenues, corporate revenues of this much, so we're lowering our future expectations of sales and profits, which lowers the price of stocks today because who the hell is who expected 100% tariffs on the whole world?
You say that you try to be nonpartisan down the middle, and I know that you have in the past, but like those days are gone at this point, given that economic policy is driven by one man's ego and has no semblance really in any economic policy or monetary policy that any conservative or anybody. This is crazy. This is all him. His own. Nobody in all of economics or finance thinks that these across-the-board tariffs, you said they're paused, they're not paused, are a good idea the way that they were done, the way that they've been carried out, with no organization, no warning. His own people don't know what he's doing. They don't talk to him. And he's doing this all, obviously, so companies and countries and law firms and universities come to him and ask him for permission to have their money back, to have their certainty back, to have their tariffs taken away. This is all about one man's ego. It's not based on any economic, financial policy that we've ever seen. And so there's no way to predict what's coming except for the fact that the ports on the West Coast are empty. And I see and hear and talk to people that are saying this is like pre-pandemic in terms of supply chain disruption, which will cause inflation. And I don't know if you think anything differently about any of that, but if it's true, then when could it ever go back, if ever?
So let's flesh all that out. And some of the stuff you said, I just want to annotate a little bit.
Okay, good luck.
So first, I spend most of my time looking at crowd behavior, right? When we talk about sentiment, when we talk about inflation expectations, when we talk about prices, you're looking at crowds of decision makers, and collectively their decision has an impact. When we look back through history, that has never turned on the whims of a single person. You have to go back to Genghis Khan and Julius Caesar.
He's that guy.
That's the position you're arguing, and I'm not disagreeing with. I am saying it's very hard to plan for the future. There's an expression amongst criminal attorneys, hey, what are my chances in this case? Depends on what the judge had for breakfast. What does that mean? Humans are humans. We are we're subjective. We're not rational calculating machines. And sometimes you get lucky with a judge and sometimes you get unlucky with a judge. This has never happened at this level before, where it's, I don't know what the right word is, arbitrary, whimsical, capricious, random, that the decisions don't seem to make any sense. And remember, when Trump was president in 2017, I think it was Jared Kushner who had to search the world to find Peter Navarro because there weren't any economists who thought this was a good idea.
Yeah,
they found the one guy.
And Peter Navarro had to search for the world for someone who agreed with him, and he made up somebody.
So I don't care about the inside D.C. political machinations. What I look at and what my clients expect me to do is say, figure out what's going on and give us an objective assessment of what the risks we're facing. And I literally posted that last week on the site,
how can you or anybody figure out what's going on if it all hinges on, you said, the whimsical, the madness of our king?
So what you can't, and so when you can't give look, the world is complicated and it's not black and white, it's not binary. So you can say, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What are all the gradations in between? And the best case scenario is, this is 3D chess. This is a negotiating tactic. He'll eventually walk all this back because I'm giving you the best case scenario. I'm not telling you what's going to happen. The best case scenario is, hey, legitimately, China is a bad player on the global trade stage. They steal intellectual property. They treat our companies unfair. They hack corporate America. They don't treat our companies and investors fairly with their products in China. And so there's grounds for discussion. What feels reckless to me is playing Russian roulette, putting one bullet in a revolver and spinning it in order to play a game with the U.S. $28 trillion economy in order to squeeze concessions from China. That feels very asymmetrical. Your upside is this, but your downside, the worst case scenario, is the end of Pax Americana, the end of the dollar as the world's reserve currency, as the U.S. as a trusted ally and military, political, and economic leader. And once the dollar is no longer a reserve currency of the world, why would anyone want to buy our bonds and fund our debt? This has the potential. The worst case scenario, and again, this is not my prediction. I'm giving you the tails. I'm giving you the outliers. This has the potential to really become a debacle. I'm friendly with Ben Hunt of Epsilon Theory, who wrote a piece, The End of Pax Americana. He's like way out there in terms of what I think is a worst case scenario. This is what it would look like if it really goes off the rails. That's his forecast. And he is laying out in great detail the global political, military, international relations problems that this sort of we haven't tried this since Smoot-Hawley in the 1930s, and that made the Great Depression worse. So it's shocking. The reason the market failed to anticipate this is because everybody said, we should take him seriously, not literally. Nobody would do that. That's economic suicide. And so the market spasm was, Jesus, this is a problem. The rally you have seen since off of the lows are, hey, cooler heads are going to prevail. The adults will be in charge. This will all be walked back. He doesn't have the cards. But that isn't its own problem because suddenly the rest of the world realizes maybe we need China more than we need the United States. That's a bad outcome.
Then that's a very possible outcome. I've linked to this Ben Hunt Epsilon Theory, Crashing the Car of Pax Americana article that Barry just mentioned. I've linked to it.
Ben, by the way, is a super smart guy, former hedge fund manager, really more of a pure academic, and just his brain goes places where most of us are afraid to wander, and he's so interesting to read. And I'm always like, oh, my God.
Is he ever
What's that?
Is he ever correct in his prediction?
Sure, he's been right about a lot of things. He's an intellectual who wants people to consider the range of possibilities they haven't. And he's been talking about this for a few months. So when April 2nd came out and then Crashing the Car of Pax Americana came out, he was like, hey, I've been telling you guys he's serious as a heart attack about this crazy stuff. Don't take him seriously. Take him literally. So far, he's been proven right about this.
Oh, great.
But I really want people to just understand, look, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. Let me remind everybody that the tariff power lay in Congress, and Congress has the ability to take it back.
Well,
so I suspect if this will have to get worse before it gets better. But who knows? Maybe this is 3D chess, and maybe this is just a brilliant negotiating tactic.
Come on.
Maybe.
Come on.
I don't think that's the case, but I would love to be wrong about that. 3D chess. This is like disproven. Look, you know what? We all engage in false equivalency, and I try not to. You can't say the Earth is an oblate spheroid, says these people, but the flat earthers, they make some good points. You can't do that. There is, when it comes to tariff policy, it's flat earth sort of stuff. Your natural instinct is to say, no one can seriously believe this, so something else has to be going on. By the way, I said that about George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq. Look, nobody believes this. I wrote a piece on this. Nobody believes this.
Oh, great.
Nobody believes that this is about hidden WMDs in Iraq. There's got to be something else. And I was wildly wrong. That was 22 years ago, and I was completely wrong about that because I assumed the rationality of the President of the United States. You're not just going to take us to war for no reason, are you? By the way, that's not the country that attacked us on September 11th. It's the other country. Why are you moving troops from the bad country to a third country? I was completely wrong about that. Like, it made no sense. It's still to this day. No, I have yet to hear a rational explanation for why that war happened and why we dropped the ball in Afghanistan and why we let the Saudis off the hook. What was it? 21 of 23 9/11 terrorists were Saudis? How did that happen? So sometimes when you look at like really irrational behavior and say, nobody can be that like reckless. So I'm mixing my wishful thinking with trying to figure out what comes next, and I can't tell what's going to happen next. I don't think anybody can.
The United States has apparently, according to Reuters, approached China seeking talks over Trump's 145% tariffs, according to a social media account affiliated with Chinese state media. This is being reported today by a number of outlets. It wasn't going to be China approaching the U.S. If this were easy, the U.S.-China relationship, you mentioned some of the transgressions over the past 10, 20 years, then Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden would have been able to fix the issues around IP, around trade imbalances, and all the rest. It's not simple. It's very complex, which is why Trump's gamut here has already failed, and they stopped sending shit from China, and they're predicting that, as Trump said yesterday, maybe you won't be able to get $30 at cheap prices, maybe just $2 at a little higher prices. Did you hear him say that?
Yeah, I heard.
Imagine if any Democrat said there's going to be some pain and taxes are going to go up and you're not going to be able to get all the toys you want for Christmas because of my policies.
So that's what I mean by I think it gets worse before it gets better. So here's a little bit of wishful thinking. So wishful thinking A is Congress grows a spine.
No.
And enough.
Yesterday, there's 3 Republicans to take back control of this emergency bullshit emergency control act that they declared. And 3 Republicans voted with Democrats, 49-49. A couple Democrats weren't there. Regardless, the House isn't going to take it up for a vote.
That's not until it gets worse. It's going to get worse, and a few people will start to say, right now the fear is I'm going to get primaried on my right by someone from MAGA, and you need again, I'm not a political analyst. I'm spitballing here. The reason I say it gets worse before it gets better, I have vivid recollection in October 2008 when the world was falling apart post Lehman Brothers, and a group of moderate Republicans and Democrats introduced legislation to give the Fed the tools.
That was 200 years ago in pre-Trump.
But let me remind you that it was voted down initially by the Rand Paul libertarian.
But it was,
and the market took a giant dump, and by Friday it passed overwhelmingly. People were terrified. And fuck it, we have to do that. So that's what I mean by it has to get worse before it gets better. So wishful thinking A is a handful of Republicans who are in either purple states or states that Trump won but just barely, and they're starting to recognize that they're going to get primaried from the middle. They come to their senses, and then the next president appoints Barack Obama as our global ass-kissing ambassador to repair the damage that this administration did and walk this back. That's my best-case scenario.
I like your best-case scenario. Let's talk about what's happening in different sectors right now, because obviously you've talked a lot about the money markets, but housing is in real trouble for a number of reasons before tariffs. Tourism is in real trouble because nobody wants to come to America anymore because they hate us, A, and B, they're worried they might get kidnapped.
Ridiculous.
And we could talk about automobiles. We should probably talk about crypto because he's doing everything he can to create a new form of currency so that the Trump family can get rich while the rest of us get fucked.
How about McDonald's?
And McDonald's just reported, you tweeted about this earlier or you posted about it earlier. They had no growth or something like that. Why is that
the biggest drop in U.S. sales since the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic 5 years ago?
What is the most popular, arguably, fast food chains profits measure?
The spending habits of the bottom half of the economic strata. And so what that's telling us is that – so I have a buddy who lives in the Berkshires, off in the woods. And he's surrounded by, within an hour drive – dozens of universities and research facilities and hospitals, and the DOGE cuts are already leading people. Now, by the way, there's a whole other discussion. Congress has allocated this money. It is not within the authority of the White House to cancel it, and we've already seen, 100, 200 lawsuits saying, sorry, this is – and they are proceeding just as they proceeded in 2020, all the litigation – where the president lost 62 out of 63 cases. They're proceeding apace, and the White House is not doing well in litigation. And I hate like hell to rely on courts to save the process, but Congress is in charge of budget and disperses it. The White House is not authorized to say, we're not giving money to fill in the blank. And the most egregious examples are pediatric cancer research and blah, blah, blah. But all these people, we're doing real damage to our scientific base. Research is being canceled. Research animals are being euthanized. People are being let go. This is starting to turn into the early days. Let's call this pre-recession. But it won't take much for what was someone just tweeted the Wall Street Journal headline from October 31st. Whoever gets elected inherits an incredibly robust economy. This is all self-inflicted. And you diet and exercise in order to achieve a certain goal, but theoretically it's worth it. You're healthier, you live longer, you look better. Great. This seems to be very asymmetrical, that the reckless asymmetry of putting the entire global economy at risk and the United States relationship everywhere else, that's why you get Ben Hunt's crash of the Pax Americana regime, which is very frightening.
Yeah, it's very frightening. I'm sure investors are panicking, right?
No, market's up today. April, I think NASDAQ was up for the month, which is...
I don't think these markets are representative of what's happening in the economy. I think this is some kind of what's it called in your world? They're in denial.
Listen, markets aren't perfect. They don't get it perfectly right all the time, but they get it more or less right most of the time. And let me tell you why I say that. So you look at the financial circumstances during the pandemic when everybody felt the world was coming to an end. And the market was essentially saying, we'll figure this out. There's going to be a giant fiscal stimulus that'll help the country. There'll eventually be a vaccine. This has been in development. mRNA has been in development for 10 years. And let me tell you, as the first 3 months of April, May, June, I had constant emails from clients and media and, the market's gone berserk. It's detached from reality. No, it figured out that we would get through this. And so I'm not a big fan of saying the market always knows best, the wisdom of crowds, because crowds are right most of the time until the trend is your friend, until the bend at the end is the joke that it rhymes. It has to be true. But we're in a set of circumstances where call it a failure of imagination. None of us believed anybody would do something that is so obviously counter to, let's call it accepted economic principles. That's why everybody is shocked. Wait, like how often in your life have you heard of a friend who did, he did what? Was he drunk? No, he did that when he was sober? Oh, my God, that seems crazy. That's where we are now.
Yeah, that's not the best analogy because there's never been anybody like this guy ever that is in any kind of power of any kind of organization that is so irresponsible and so driven by his own ego, not even his own interests, not even his own political interests. But
I think he's pretty good at maintaining an eye on his own personal interests. He's done a good job, and I think we don't give him enough credit. Like, it's one thing to get lucky occasionally. I think he is a shockingly good reader of the public's mood and a surprisingly excellent communicator for someone with a limited vocabulary. He's just kicked everybody's ass time and time again. How many primaries, how many elections does he have to win before people say, what is going on here? Something is happening. And something is happening. You've never had anyone like him before in American history.
And he's destroyed everything he touches.
That was Rick Wilson's book.
He destroyed this country during COVID. He told us that it wasn't going to be that bad and it would just go away and 1 million people died. He's doing the exact same thing now.
It's more than 1 million. And in fact, when you look at the U.S., so whenever anyone says what you're saying, and I'm in a mixed crowd of people of different political persuasions.
I know a lot of your friends are fucking idiots.
They politically disagree with you.
No, they're just idiots. They're selfish pricks.
What my response in that sort of mixed crowd is, The data shows that amongst industrialized Western economies, the United States' performance as an entity with a healthcare system was far worse in terms of mortality rates, vaccination rates, survival rates.
Of course.
And I don't want to just look, I could just say to people who I debate with, you're a selfish idiot. And of course, that's not going to change anybody's minds. But what I try and do is say to people, look, here's what the data is. And if you're going to tell me the data doesn't matter, then we're done having this conversation, because if your beliefs matter more than the facts, then I'm never going to convince you you belong to a cult or you belong to an ideology that
I think that what I think that you are missing in your analysis of Trump and the political analysis of his record is that he's good at convincing people to vote for him. He's terrible at doing the job once he gets it. He did nothing when he was president the first time but pass a major tax cut for wealthy people. He destroyed and divided the country. He destroyed our relationships with other countries. And he made it easier for Russia to exist in the world. And now, in under 100 days, he's had the worst 100 days as any president ever. He hasn't passed any legislation.
Which is shocking to me. How is that possible? You have the House and the Senate.
Because I'm telling you,
I'm trying to approach this. I don't want to just be in my little bubble and have everybody sing Kumbaya to each other.
No, you don't have to be in your bubble to know that the straight analysis is he actually thinks that an executive order is equal to legislation.
I don't believe that. I think he doesn't want to do the hard work of political analytical legislation. That is hard work, and that is not his forte.
He could get Republicans to vote for a gun ban if he wanted to. He could get anything.
Why hasn't there been a budget passed? Why hasn't there been a grand bargain? Why hasn't there been a tax cut passed? If he could do that,
because he can't govern. Because
you and I are arguing at cross purposes. Here's the problem with executive orders. The next president comes in and signs an order. Everything Trump signed is now overturned. Every executive order the previous president is. That's why legislation is important. And all of these executive orders, some of which cross constitutional boundaries, such as not spending the money as directed by Congress, which is why there's so much litigation. And he just lost 7-2 and 9-0 in the Supreme Court. And where eventually either he will follow what the court does or we're going to have a crisis, what the court orders, or we're going to have a crisis. But I'm not in the crisis is inevitable or the crisis is here yet, but it's certainly out there. And I keep saying you could sign all the executive orders you want, and the repercussions of some of these are damaging, and I think it will get worse before it gets better, but it's not the same thing as passing legislation.
I think he thinks it is.
I'm not going to convince you otherwise because I don't know what the hell he thinks.
I do.
I can't read into his mind.
I can.
It's too easy and lazy to say, oh, this guy is just clueless, blah, blah, blah. I'm not giving him credit for being a legislative genius, but I will admit to being perplexed as to why they haven't passed legislation. Which, by the way, is far more long-lasting and impactful than these performative auto pen executive orders.
It's ridiculous. Have you paid any attention or much to the healthcare sector, and particularly what he's doing at NIH, and particularly what hospitals, research facilities,
and
it's
bad. It's really bad,
are having to deal with? One could argue that America became a rich and powerful country because after World War II, we invested in science and research, sold it all to the world.
And attracted the greatest scientists from around the globe. This is a cliche. Half of the C-suite in the biggest the top 1,000 Silicon Valley companies, public and private, are immigrants who came to America to pursue the American dream. first-generation immigrants, and if you go to second generation, it's like a majority.
Yeah.
Like we're comfortable, and they're like hungry, and oh my God, this is the land of opportunity. Why would anyone? And by the way, Bush did this post 9/11. Why would you want to discourage the best and the brightest from around the world from coming to American universities and staying here afterwards? P.S. Catherine Rampell at the Washington Post wrote a great piece. Why is Trump attacking America's greatest export?
Yeah.
What is our greatest export? Higher education. People come from around the world. It's not just Columbia, Yale, Harvard. It's the entire ecosystem
How do you measure the effect that has on the economy, even just the healthcare sector, much less healthcare?
Very hard to measure. Tell me what the value today of a person in 2036 curing pediatric cancer. I can't tell you what that is, but I could tell you it would be bad if that doesn't happen, and if it didn't happen because of this sort of, I don't even know what to talk. Is it xenophobia? Is it? I don't know. I can't. And a lot of this goes back. Look, the United States has been a questionable actor when it comes to race and country of origin. From our origins with slavery to Japanese internment to what took place with stopping grad students after 9/11 to this today. And yet, despite that, people from around the world come here, or at least they have been, and contribute mightily to our circumstances. So let me make this rational for a minute, just for a second. Look, in my lifetime, we had September 11th terrorist attacks, and I was a New Yorker, and my office was headquartered in Two World Trade. So that's a vivid memory in the midst of the dot-com implosion. And then 7 years later, we had the great financial crisis, and that was a disaster. And then we had the pandemic where we performed so poorly. And I have to stop and ask myself, is this going to be worse than any of those three? Because we managed to get through all of those, although arguably they are a factor leading to this today.
They are. Everything's connected, but the difference in all of those different crises, there were several different factors that contributed to it. This is one crazy person. He could have just added onto what every economist described as an unbelievable economy given the circumstances for just years before it. Nobody predicted it would be as good as it was. He could have just rode that out, but one guy. Let me ask you, I know you got to go. You got to go? One more?
No, I'm just watching the screen to see where markets are.
My last question is about investments in renewable energy, because he is seemingly canceling previous investments made by the last administration and closing factories that were under construction or had been signed and invested in. And he's talking about old fossil fuel. He's talking about putting Americans to work several generations, apparently, putting together iPhones. He's closing existing factories that would be making things for the future to open like factories that would make wooden wheels and be running cotton gins. It's bizarre, the investment in the past that he's making, and seemingly canceling the investment in the future based on the
He's trying to, and the pushback I would give you is the Inflation Reduction Act, which included a lot of legislation passed by Congress, signed by President Biden, that allocated money to this. There's litigation about this. He's doing damage. The question is how much of it can be walked back. I am constantly forced to remind people we don't live in a world as it exists. We live in the world as we exist.
Right.
The headlines we read, the algorithms that excite us, there's a lot of noise, but you sometimes have to look below the noise and say, is this really happening? And that's the shift from soft data, the sentiment stuff that's got you all excited, to the hard data, which is the economic information that gets me concerned and excited. So we're seeing airlines tell us that people aren't booking flights. We're hearing the head of the port in L.A., one of the biggest ports in the country, telling us that container traffic is dropping 35%. You don't just push a button and a ship arrives. It takes 10 days to get here.
Right.
So 2-3 weeks, that traffic is coming down. I don't want to just cherry pick data, but so it's travel, it's McDonald's, it's goods shippings, it's all the GM just said they see there's a $5 billion cost to tariffs, so automobiles are going to be in trouble. There are a lot of warning signs, and what I say to you is this will get better, but not until it gets much worse. I'm not big on forecasts, but the only way this gets better. So let me remind you of my favorite little tidbit from the pandemic. Like the early days of the pandemic, things were starting to show up as odd. I have a vivid recollection of my sister was visiting from the city. And, hey, as long as you're out here, let's go to Target and we'll load up on to take your stuff back into the city. No toilet paper. I don't remember if it was January of 2020, but it was before we were full blown. Hey, I was like, shit's happening here. No pun intended. And I remember as things started to get worse, there was an attempt to rename a library in Washington, D.C., and the Democrats and the Republicans who cares? It's meaningless nonsense. And they could not agree. And then the next day was when the NBA canceled the season. No more games. We're canceling games. And then suddenly we're in lockdown mode. And Congress, on a nearly unanimous and obviously bipartisan basis, passed the biggest fiscal stimulus as a percentage of GDP since World War II. So shit gets really bad, and that's why I gave you that October 2008 example. They refused to pass the bill authorizing the Fed to do stuff. The people started to panic, and then every congressman wakes up with a pit in their stomach. I'm going to not only be thrown out of office, but they're going to do a recall. They're not even waiting for the election. I got to do something. And so eventually you called people, what did you say? They were selfish pricks. Everybody deep down inside is selfish. They care about their own self-preservation and their jobs. And at a certain point, if this gets bad enough, people in D.C. are going to say, hey, fealty to a guy who's going to get me fired. Who's the head of national security? Had a safe Republican seat for, 6 years, 8 years? About to get shit canned. Like at a certain point, people are going to say, hey, what's the old joke? Every man for himself, said the elephant who danced amongst the chickens. That's what's going to happen at a certain point. People are going to say, I'm not taking a bullet for this guy. I got to women and children first up until a point. And then these people are pushing everyone out of the lifeboat. It's got to get worse before it gets better, or at least my two big frames of reference, the pandemic and the financial crisis. I always go back to history. I don't know what happens, but historically, when we've been in an environment like this, it needs to get really bad before it gets better.
President Jim Jones, someone wrote in the chat, I appreciate your humility. I'm
not saying drink the Kool-Aid and kill yourself. I'm saying sometimes it takes a crisis before people. Winston Churchill, you can always rely on the Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possibility.
It's a pretty accurate quote, and he was a fairly smart guy. My friend, we appreciate you joining us as always. I hope everybody goes and buys your book, How Not to Invest, and supports you and follows you everywhere. There it is.
I'm having fun talking about it. It's doing really well. It's the number one on Amazon in investing, and
there you go.
It's just been a blast talking to people about it. Wholly unintentional discussions of information hygiene and knowing what to focus on and looking at data and managing your own behavior. I could tell you I've had conversations with people over the past month and a half. Hey, man, you don't want to panic yet. You got to just take a deep breath. Right. Because people are starting to really get nervous.
Yeah.
And if history is a guide, We know the path. It's going to do this before it does this. I'm not just talking markets. I'm talking sentiment, economics, people's behavior, people's headspace. You would think you would be inured to this sort of chaos, but whenever I hear people talk about uncertainty, I always feel like what they're saying is we have lost the ability to lie to ourselves. The future is never certain. You never know what's going to happen. That's just a fact. That I use in the book. I use all the examples about people passing on Star Wars, not thinking the Beatles did a good job on Ed Sullivan, people saying, I don't want to, Squid Games, John Wick. There's like endless examples. So nobody knows what the future is. But we can look at history and say, here's what this says to us. And dumb luck that the book came out right into the teeth of this mayhem.
Congratulations, and thank you very much. Appreciate you for joining us.
My pleasure. Anytime, Pete.
For watching live. I'm going to end now. All right, that's it. Ritholtz, go get the book, go support him, go subscribe to his newsletter, go listen to his podcast, and thank you very much for supporting mine, for being here today, all the way to the end, you bumblebees. Go buy John Carroll's new album, johncarroll.org, and that's all I've got for you on today's show. Thank you very much for listening. Be the change you want to see in the world. Good luck. Love you. Talk to you tomorrow.
Let the brave meet the challenge, let the meek weak flee. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up humble.